Gotta holler if you really real enough. Other rappers is delirious. Yeah, it's really that serious. Better holler if you really feeling me. I gotta keep it 100, ayy. If you don't like it, then fuck it, ayy. We gonna win in the end, yeah, we gonna live in abundance. I gotta keep it 100, ayy. If you don't like it, then fuck it, ayy. We gonna win in the end, yeah, we gonna. I gotta keep it 100. We gotta stop all the stunting. You know we coming from nothing. Yo, you talking about money, you bluffing. We gotta do something different. We gotta change how we live in. We gotta do better for women. We gotta do better for children. We gotta listen to victims, whether Jewish or Muslim or Christian. It doesn't matter your religion. You gotta stand against the system, or else you just another villain. How you just sitting there chilling?
Yes. Peace, everyone. Peace. My name is Jamar Jabari, and welcome to another episode, Jabari Vok Podcast. I know that I missed you guys a week and a half. Let's just be honest, probably longer than that. Internet was not doing well. Internet was awful. And I found out that there was some issues. Called Xfinity. Everything's great. So we're back to the regular program. We're going to be dishing out more content, not just TikTok rails all the time. More content, more podcasting. And I have a very, very special guest. We're going to get right into it. Dr. David Johns is in the building. Good afternoon, Dr. David.
Just call me David.
Just call you David?
Yeah, I tend to say that Black people, especially those who knew me before the degree, can call me David, but white people are obligated as my form of reparations to call me doctor.
I like that. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, David. And I wanted to really, really talk to you because I've seen you all over, Breakfast Club, everything, just doing the great work that we definitely need a lot of queer, Black, and brown voices in our community, especially someone like me who is also pansexual. I love seeing you out there helping us because it's so important. We don't have that many voices. I mean, we only have like Laverne Cox and you out in the mainstream, and Chardonnay. Well, she goes by Carly now. I'm sorry, Chardonnay. Carly Morlow, who is so phenomenal out there. So I wanted to bring you on and have a conversation about the work that you do and everything, because I think it's so important, and I think it's very, very great that you could take the time to come on my little show and rap with me real quick.
I appreciate that, but do it again. Don't say little. Don't minimize what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So to start off, we have had a different type of pride celebration this year. I've had a few guests on, like Knox, who is a huge Black business owner. They go by they, them pronouns. In the Connecticut area, we're all New Englanders. And one thing that came out to me, what they were talking about, is that they don't have the celebration of pride in mind. It's just a lot of sadness with everything that's going on. And one thing that really solidified exactly what they were saying is that recently in September, there were a lot of pride events that are supposed to go on around the country. And New Haven does their pride in September as well, too. And there was a bomb threat. Mm-hmm. And then I found out there was bomb threats all over the country. And it definitely gives me that sentiment that there is a whole new, a whole new campaign to attack us. And I mean, all of us from LGBTQ, especially our trans siblings. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to know, I want to ask you for the first question is that, what is your advice on how, even for community members like us, to combat that in a small town, well, small city like New Haven, small state, like how can we combat this type of aggression? Because the bomb threat thing never happened in like over a decade. So I was very, very shocked that was something that happened here in New Haven, of all places, which is very, very left.
Ish. Specifically, in Connecticut more generally is also home to the largest gap in equity with regard to spending on public education. So let me back up and first say thank you for inviting me in and sharing your pansexuality. You didn't have to do that. And I appreciate you caring enough about this conversation to share that with me. The asterisk there is I don't use the term coming out. I hate it. It's like nails on a chalkboard because people think they're entitled to the information.
Right.
When I really believe that all of us have something, if you're not a white man, cisgendered, heterosexual, all of us have something society says we should feel shame around. And if more of us acknowledge that and how power works, maybe we can increase competence and compassion by inviting folks in identities, especially when they're hidden. So that's one. Second, you packed a lot into the intro.
Sorry.
Don't forward. I just want to acknowledge it and name it and then work through it. So one, I'm struggling with what feels like for you newness around attacks, terrorism, and aggression. And there's a part of me that celebrates that for you for at least a decade. There wasn't a sense of how white supremacy, fascism, and resisting, celebrating and making space for the kind of plurality that exists in our society, in America, in most spaces, protected you, right? Like you didn't experience it, you didn't have to think about it.
Right.
And that resistance, terrorism, and targeting is not new and has always been a part of our public experience, especially in our very young and very fragile democracy. So I'm trying to make a couple of points, which is that before white supremacy and the colonial enterprise that resulted in the colonization of the US,
right,
Black people existed throughout the continent of Africa and the diaspora in beautifully diverse ways. An author I love and quote often, Sabufu Some, wrote in a book, The Spirit of Intimacy, in chapter 13, which is titled Homosexuality, quote, "The words lesbian and gay did not exist in my village in West Africa, but the word gatekeeper did." Later, they write, and gatekeepers hold space between the community, the village, and our ancestors. This is the same sentiment embodied in our native siblings honoring two-spirited people and the role they play. So I want to be clear that before colonial white supremacy, we, those of us who are queer with a capital Q, in our ways of identifying or our politics are now targeted, but there was a time where things were different. That's one.
Right.
Post white people, white supremacy, what Black feminists refer to as a matrix of domination, the signs, systems, and symbols that allow white supremacy to be omnipresent yet hyper invisible. Most of us, Black people, generally, and then Black, queer, trans, and gender expansive people more specifically, have often had to deal with this targeting that comes from at least two things. One is white supremacy and their hierarchy of power and how they police and protect privilege based on these socially constructed identities and membership into communities that then are either provided access to or denied access to things like healthcare, or good education, or quality housing, or name whatever one needs in order to be happy, healthy, and whole, or otherwise thrive. That's one dynamic. Very much related to that is another dynamic of a legacy of African descendants protecting one another by policing presentation. This manifests both in sort of politics of presentation that suggests that if you are docile and or present in ways that are close to Eurocentric or white, then you will be protected by that bubble of privilege. Or more specifically to those of us who are queer, trans, or gender expansive, that if you are not gay, if you are cisgendered and heterosexual, and enter into the expectations that people have for you, including marriage that is acknowledged by and sanctioned by the state.
Right.
We sometimes engage in policing and protecting as a way of trying to get closer to freedom. Those tensions are new. And so for me, the thread through all of this is really this both and. You started by naming that for a lot of folks, this recent Pride season, which is also separate for a lot of folks. There's like Pride, which has become white Pride. And then there's actual Pride, which is like the Black Pride circuit.
Oh, yeah.
Which are separate, but like even in that naming sort of duality, there's always the both and. We should remember that Pride was birthed out of radical resistance. People at Stonewall Inn were forced there because there were policies in New York that said you could discriminate against people you believe to be queer.
Right.
You could not serve liquor to us because the lie that we can't hold our liquor, which forced us into places where people would serve us liquor, but then that made us vulnerable to police raids and things that resulted in the Stonewall Rebellion. But all of this to say, the last thing for me is we should always celebrate the liberation and beauty of both and not be beholden to the tyranny of either or. And sadly, for so many of us, especially while there have been so many increases and attacks on our community, we have to not only find time to grieve and honor emotions around sadness and loss and trauma, but we owe it to ourselves. And I believe we're required to fuel ourselves by also celebrating joy and rest and resistance and celebration as well.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I totally agree on that. I love how you like broke it down because it brought up things that I never actually thought of before, and it's actually something that's important for me to remember, especially a kid that's coming from a very conservative church background and I had to leave my parents' house just to be myself, and it's not their fault. It's just that that's how things go in the black families. So
it's not their fault. What part of it isn't their fault?
Well, the part of the part of just like this is the Christian culture in a way, just how the conservative Christian culture.
Let's call out.
No shouts out to mom and dad. I know we already had this conversation, mom and dad. So.
Well, listen. one of the beautiful things about being in a loving relationship, is that conversations are iterative. But right. I'm looking for a book that I know is in my office. The question is, where is it? And it's called Unclobber, and it's written by a pastor who is heterosexual, cisgender, but talked about the process of coming out after Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And essentially what he writes about in this book is that too often people skip over foundations. The foundation, as somebody who grew up with a grandfather who was a Baptist preacher in Austin, Texas till he died, going to Sunday school, church at least 3 times a week. What I know is that Jesus showed up for the least of us. I also know Jesus doesn't make mistakes. We were formed in the wombs that we were chosen to come into well before we made decisions about how we would move through the world, a world that was constructed before us. Acknowledging that Jesus doesn't make mistakes. We cannot be the abomination that white colonial renderings of Christianity suggest that we are. Right. That we use to rationalize and maintain our oppression. And in fact, what most people do who have no connection to the source, the anchor of Christianity, which should be showing up in Christ-like love for others and in relationship with others, people cherry pick these passages from the Bible that are clobber references. And so they misread Sodom and Gomorrah, not appreciating that homosexuality as a term and a concept was something that was created after that story was told, recited for years, and then written in a book that has been heavily edited, that is incredibly important, and is still a text. And people miss critical connections to appreciate that the core, that passage in the Bible is about xenophobia. It's about consequences of not making space for neighbors, for people who might not affirm the things that are most important about how you move through the world. It is not about homosexuality and the way in which we understand that term and people suggest it as a sin. I'm really pushing on two things. One is we don't talk enough about religious trauma, a term that the American Psychological Association has added to the DSM, the diagnostic that they use to name different manifestations of trauma. They've taken out homosexuality, which shouldn't have been there in the first place.
Right.
But they've added religious trauma. The second thing is, I just want us to think more critically and mind contradictions. It makes no sense for people of faith to purport to care about and be committed to a Jesus that modeled literally showing up for those who were stigmatized, who were thrown away, who were marked as other to no fault of their own. And if we started and stopped there, those of us who purport to care about Black people and to know the Lord, could do a lot better. I know that wasn't one of your questions, but.
Oh, no, but like I've heard of in the past, a queer pastor try to explain to me Sodom and Gomorrah inconsistencies on that, and I've never actually looked back into it, but it's so much it makes me understand more of just how much colonialism has took hold and captured the ideas of faith to the point that it's used politically to destroy us, to destroy our existence. And it's very, very much clear as day whenever someone tries to say, oh, well, this is just my faith, but to have how much have you dug into it to get a full understanding? How much readings and teachings have you looked into to get a full understanding?
That's one part of it, but even let's stay on the surface, which is let me just say it more plainly.
Yeah.
What I hear you describing is people who use faith as an excuse for their fascism or their supremacy or their ignorance, to use the purest term that I can think of.
Right.
That's actually not what faith is. That's a weaponization of what should be faith. That's why I'm pushing in this moment. And not only is it white evangelical bastardization of faith that has resulted in the loss of members, right? Outside of the Church of Latter-day Saints in lots of developing parts of our world, church enrollments are dwindling. But also these ideas impact how people think about faith and family and relationships and nationhood. It's all one and the same. The book, just so you have the full reference, and others do as well, is called Unclobber: Rethinking Our Misuse of the Bible on Homosexuality. and it's written by Colby Martin, Martin is the last name.
Okay, I'll make sure I'll put that in the show notes. Boom. That's all. That's really awesome. I didn't even know a book like that existed.
There are lots of them. There are also other books that are about ways of being and thinking about gender before colonization. There's this book, Heterosexual Africa ? History of the Idea and Age of Exploration. This includes things about HIV/AIDS. There's this book, The Transgender Issue, Trans Justice is Justice for All by Sean Fay. This is centered in a British experience of a non-Black person, but it's helpful for thinking about a lot of the issues that we are experiencing in this country. Also say that there's lots of books very much related to your opening observations. I would argue that the issue is that they're not in the quote mainstream. There are a lot of us who are doing this work and who have been for quite some time. Not all of us have access to quote unquote mainstream platforms, so people know about it.
Yeah, and I wish I could just like rent your library because that's really awesome.
Now, this is a reminder. I'll do another video in the next 2 weeks, but I post them on Instagram at Dr. David Johns, and I'm happy to share with you when I make them.
Okay, perfect. It looks like my mic is better now. Okay, yeah, I'll definitely keep a lookout on that because, like I said, like when you were mentioning the mainstream part, like that is my I think that's what the issue is because a lot of Americans look at mainstream a lot, even though as much as we try to say that we don't, we do get a lot of our information from mainstream, and a lot of mainstream voices that are centered in media. And I've had this issue with people that I've come to know that's in media that have way larger platforms than me, and I see the biasness within it as well too. They don't bring on really the people that they want that they talk negatively about, and especially trans people. They don't go and find a trans voice to at least talk to them about what their issue is with it, because I thought, and when you pursue media, you're supposed to be non-biased, but America has changed that, and we have nothing but biases 24/7, and they don't bring on people that could counter the argument. They bring on people that say, oh, I used to be trans and this is why I'm not trans anymore. They bring on people that are just stark, I call them Nazis at this point. They are straight up just straight towing the white supremacist line of just acknowledging that there is nothing else but just male and female, and there's no trans, there's no gay, there's no straight. Well, there's straight, of course, but there's no pansexual or anything. And they bring up these schools, which is why I want to ask you, because they make it seem like it's a very, very national issue when there's only a few school districts that I read about that are having these problems. I haven't heard about it really at all in Connecticut, except for one school district. And my issue is that they give a lot of misinformation on these kids, saying that they got sex changes and all this, and you can't even do that until you're 18. And so that's why I was like very, very much applauding you for being one of those few voices in the mainstream media, because like I wish they bring you on more to all these other bigger platforms instead of just keeping you in the Black culture. Like they need to bring you on everywhere because we need more. Like, do you see that, or you like that's like you're growing towards infiltrating the cisses?
I don't. I appreciate and honor what you're sharing and your perspective and appreciation for my work. I celebrate being an organizer and always being committed to creating spaces for my voice and work to reach folks as it's supposed to. I have no desire to be picked or chosen by the powers that be. So to be clear, there are 8 corporations that control all of the media that most of us have access to outside of media that's produced by and uploaded by folks like yourself. That's by design. That's why we've had hundreds of days of a writer strike and still are enduring a hopefully closing soon actor strike. And what I'm not interested in is being chosen to perform as a minstrel in ways that too often we are both invited and expected to.
Like tokenization.
That's one dimension of it. But beyond the tokenization, I'm talking about being invited to perform as a clown for white folks, and or to show up in what Ralph Ellison wrote about in Invisible Man as the Battle Royale. It's, I don't know if you watch Zeus Network, but it's every show on Zeus Network. It's Candace Owens and her particular brand of anti-Blackness.
Oh God, yeah.
It is being a foot soldier for white supremacy in ways that one can lie to themselves and suggest self-protect, but really only result in maintaining separation and oppression of Black folks. I have no desire to do that or play those games, and appreciate that media, how people consume media, is changing. So I'm focused on the work, not necessarily trying to change gatekeepers or the access that they might otherwise provide me to do that, which I'm gonna do anyway. You, as a part of what you shared, I just want to pull out as around these problems. I want to be precise in naming that the contemporary concern with trans people is a war that's been manufactured by white evangelical leaders who were power hungry and who are trying to turn out voters based on fear and ignorance. This includes folks like Betsy DeVos, the former Secretary of Education, a white woman who knows nothing about public education
at all.
Who's been intended on destroying it, right? So folks like Betsy are actively funding efforts to pass anti-LGBTQ legislation, both here in the US. In the last year, there have been nearly 600 anti-LGBTQ bills. The precise number is 525 bills were introduced in 41 states. Over 220 of these bills explicitly target trans people. Over 76 of these bills have been signed into law as of June 5th, more than any year on record and more than double of last year. The vast majority of these bills target trans folks and play on the ignorance that people have around gender identity generally, deviance outside of what people believe is natural or normal, but is really privileged, pejorative ways of being. But the reality is the reality is that trans folks have always existed. Trans students have always existed. This idea that there are new people and new problems that now need to be solved and prioritized above getting clean, portable water in Flint, or dealing with coronavirus, or improving access to education, or getting people access to homeowners insurance in Florida because the governor cares not about the people of that great state, but about his own political ambition. Schools and sports associations have found ways to support inclusive, safe communities of practice for decades. This war is new and it's manufactured. Interestingly enough, some of this started in Connecticut. where there are two Black girls, young women, who were running track in Connecticut.
This is the Chelsea Mitchell case. Okay, yeah.
That started what has become this national focus here that has also bled over on the continent. So for folks who don't know, there are about 22 nonprofit organizations that get tax benefits in the US that are responsible for most of these bills here and similar bills on the continent of Africa. In Uganda, they just successfully passed a Kill the Gays bill.
Yeah.
That was held up so that the president of the country could establish a registry that says if you tell us that you're a homosexual and agree to go to conversion therapy, we're not going to take you to jail. Similar strategies that were used by Hitler to identify and exterminate Jews. It's akin to what white politicians like the governor and failed history teacher in Florida and his counterpart in Texas and others who are passing laws to criminalize the provision of gender affirming care are also doing, and the word for it is genocide. They are legislating genocide, and that is also not new. And so I don't need people to understand our experiences. I'm a Black, same gender loving man. There are parts of being trans, being pan that I will never know. I don't need to know. That's the benefit of living in a diverse world. But what I do know as a Black man is how genocide works. And I hope that more Black people and people who purport to care about Black people can appreciate that and use that as an incentive to be more aware of woke. Woke is a term, which means both aware of and then committed to action as a result of the awareness.
Yeah. And let me give you my last question. Following on the trans issue as well too. We have an organization, awesome organization here in Connecticut called Peer Pride, which focuses on building a lot of healthy community, especially majority run trans people. And I wish that, a lot of grassroots organizations that get a lot of funding from the state. I'm just going to say from my nonprofit experience, like just state fund. Once you start getting state funding in a nonprofit, it just seems that whatever your vision is, and which is funny because you mentioned how Connecticut was the first with the Chelsea Mitchell case. How can we? I know there's many questions or answers to this question. There's many answers to this question, but how can we combat the mainstream narrative? Because it's way too powerful and it's all lies.
Which mainstream narrative?
Just the mainstream narrative around trans kids. I think that's the most core issue of just, if you think that's the most core part, let me know. I think that's the most core issue is just narrative around children. How can we combat that? For instance, for me, who was always in circles around community people in Connecticut, where could I start there if that's better?
Yeah, I think starting home is always useful. I'll tell you this: when I worked for still my president, Barack Hussein Obama, I was appointed to lead a White House initiative on educational excellence for African Americans. And in that capacity, I did something that was really important to me, and that was to make it a rule that people could not talk about students generally and Black students more specifically without them being present. We had too many events, and we often have too many conversations with our people who are most impacted being present to keep us honest, to speak full truth to power, and otherwise contribute to those discussions. So we partner with Ebony Magazine and produce these summits around the country where the one rule is that the only people who get to speak are Black students as young as elementary school age all the way up through college. And so my advice in this context would be to center people who are often talked about, who are furthest away from power and who are most impacted by the decisions that people make. Don't allow conversations about trans folks to happen without them having the option to participate, contribute, or observe safely. I'm underscoring the safety part because related to a previous point you made about representation, it should not be the case that we, those of us who have additional superpowers because of our identities and experiences, should not be expected to do labor generally, definitely not for people who aren't demonstrating competence or compassion. To take us back to my acknowledgement about inviting in and the importance of doing the work to be deserving of that kind of connection. So all of us can do work to make sure people feel safe. And all of us can do work to throw up white supremacy in the way that James Baldwin talked about, or to do what my friend CC Battle calls white supremacy rehab. So reading books that challenge white supremacist notions of gender, understanding that on the continent, we dealt with each other based on age. Yes, there were men and women. There were also gatekeepers. And what it meant to be a woman and a man was different. It wasn't restrictive in the way that it is now based on European colonization and bastardization of religion. That's work that people can do independent of needing to be in relationship with someone to have different and deeper appreciations. I hope that answered your question. The last thing I'll say is about—
it was definitely helpful.
You named the I'm trying to move out of the sun. It's an interesting topic. Yeah. You named some dynamics that are associated with the nonprofit industrial complex. And I just want to name that for what it is. It is impossible to, I would argue, happily debate. It's hard to operate any enterprise, a for-profit corporation or a nonprofit corporation, without support. It's why for-profit entrepreneurs are constantly seeking venture capital or investors to fund and support their ideas and grow. It is why you see nonprofits seeking and relying upon local, state, federal, and philanthropic funding. And there is an opportunity for us to be more critical about and critique and dismantle the enterprise, the nonprofit industrial complex, which exists to maintain the privileges associated with white supremacy and the social separation that enables the need for nonprofit organizations that do the work of supporting specific needs for minoritized or marginalized communities. This is where Brian Stevenson, the brilliant Brian Stevenson, would say systems work exactly as they are designed to. So the idea that nonprofits become corruptible when they seek funding is similar to when Barack Obama wrote about, the higher up you go on the ladder in politics, the further away you get from the people that compelled you in the first place. Some of that is designed. That's how the system is designed. And there are opportunities for us to think critically about and be disruptive.
Yeah. I mean, that's just totally deep, because those are conversations I've had for a while now about nonprofits and how hierarchies within the white establishment. And I used to get threats and emails because I was in a nonprofit. I was actually like doing the work, but they didn't like how we were doing the work. And it scared me away, to be honest. And I think this is my first time ever saying that, but what you're saying exactly is the reason why I was so like wary of ever trying again. And shouts out to the Arts Council, one of my only physical sponsor for music projects. They definitely haven't gave me that type of that type of energy. So I definitely know, because they're state funded, and I know there are still some good, as long as they hire the right people that know where the funding needs to go, you're in there. But once you start losing it, oh man, you start losing those type of people that put in that work. Oh man.
Well, that's the thing. I was just watching a movie about Uber,
right?
A drama around Uber, and the same thing is said for that in talent. And I hope that if you carry nothing else from this conversation, I hope you carry the liberation in trying again, and building from lessons learned. I truly believe that failure is the acquiescence or the acceptance of something as fatal or complete. And that shouldn't be the case. So if this is helpful in inspiring you to revisit or reclaim some of that, I hope that you are able to do it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, David. Well, I don't want to take any more of your time because I know you got a lot of good things that need to be getting done soon. So I want to thank you so much for coming on and giving us your wisdom. And you dropped a lot of good jewels. So I hope that people that missed the live definitely hit me up in the comment section. This is going to be on Spotify and all across the platforms, and let me know how you feel about this conversation, because I think this is something that's really, really good. So once again,
let me know too, but keep it cute because I got a slick and I like to fight in spite of the PhD. Also, I just noticed that your banner on the lower Chiron says founder of NBJC. I'm not a founder. I'm a happy steward. But the organization turns 20 this year. That credit goes to folks like Keith Boykins and Mandy Carter and others.
I apologize.
Acknowledge and name that. No, all good.
I'll make sure I'll fix that in the actually I have your bio up on the details, so I'll make sure that clear. So but thank you so much for coming on, my brother, and I hope you have a really, really good day.
You too. Thank you for your labor.
Yes, thank you as well for your labor, my brother. And I hope everyone here have a really good day as well, too. This is the Jabari Vlog Podcast, and we are out.
Blank period, yeah. On my black, brown, and indigenous. Gotta holler if you really feeling this. Gotta holler if you really real enough. Other rappers is delirious. Yeah, it's really that serious. Better holler if you really feeling me. I gotta keep it 100, ayy. If you don't like it, then fuck it, ayy. We gonna win in the end, yeah, we gonna live in abundance. I gotta keep it 100, ayy. If you don't like it, then fuck it, ayy. We gonna win in the end, yeah, we gonna. I gotta keep it 100. We gotta stop all the stunting. You know we coming from nothing. Yo, you talking about money, you bluffing. We gotta do something different. We gotta change how we live in. We gotta do better for women. We gotta do better for children. We gotta listen to victims, whether Jewish or Muslim or Christian. It doesn't matter your religion. You gotta stand against the system, or else you just another villain. How you just sitting there chilling?